So, brothers, when you look at what is belief, what's the first discourse of the Buddha, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, you might have an idea or a sense that the message of the Buddha was fully formed. But when you look closely at what happened immediately after the Night of Enlightenment, it looks a bit messier, the whole process. Yeah, it was a bit more an exploration, and the Buddha had a few encounters with different people where he was trying to communicate who he was, this new being that has emerged after the Night of Enlightenment, and what he had to say, and not very successfully, at least with two of those encounters, that the message really didn't stick. Yeah. So that was in preparation, as it were, for that meeting with the five ascetics. Those 5 friends that were practicing with him. What we believe, were these different ways of mortifying the body in order to liberate the self, finding salvation. So I'm not going to refer too much to that. Just remembering that journey and the Buddha in that process of finding the right pitch, of what he needed to say to others, and finally, when Kondanya understands, that moment that is celebrated in the records. So finally, the Buddha managing to put his message across after a few attempts. And what is beautiful about that is that, in the Aryavacin Sutta, the Buddha, he really doesn't say much about the message in itself, but what he describes is the process of being in communication with the five, and he says something. Let me try to find it in my notes. He says something like, I'm not going to be able to read it because I don't know what it is now. But he says something like, they were living together, basically, and 2 of them were to beg the alms, in the alms round, and the other 4 remain together, or 3 went, and the other 3 remain. So it suggests that it was a bit more of a dialogue, something a bit much more explorative than that. But what I would like, and for me, that's interesting, because it's the heat, that is created by being in communication. San and Paul, I believe, were talking about the Mitra study group, if I'm correct, and being in that space and not having those conditions, how different it is, isn't it? So it's a particular heat. Bante in his memoirs refers to that heat just before him having this vision of Amitabha in the cave in India. Sort of at this heat, he was feverish just before having that experience, and he refers to that as tapasya, which is a heat that comes from a spiritual discipline, as it were. But what the Buddha does next, after communicating his Dharma effectively to the 5 ascetics, and then, it's not just 5, but 60, plus him, in the world, 60 arahants, 60 enlightened beings. And he sends them to the world, out of compassion for all beings, to share this new teaching. Is that he goes back to Gaia, to Uruvela, and he wants, he's on the way to the capital of Magadha at the time. He wants to repay. It's something as well that I wanted to mention, is that the Buddha seems to be quite motivated by gratitude at the beginning. Yeah? So the account says that he sat in front of the Bodhi tree for a week with unblinking eyes, just in gratitude. And he seems to be retracing he steps back to Uruvela in gratitude. He wants to pay back to the householders that sustained him when he was practicing the asceticism. But in the way that he meets these three brothers, the Kashyapa brothers, Uruvela Kashyapa, Kashyapa of the river, and Kashyapa of Gaia, and these brothers are very successful fire worshippers, and they have a bit of a gathering around them. And the encounter probably that I'm going to focus on is this encounter, this moment when the Buddha asked Uruvela Kashyapa to spend the night in the fire chamber. And he has this encounter with the Naga king, this a particular Naga king that he encounters. He has encountered another Naga before. So just before meeting the five, he had this encounter with Mukalinda. We probably know from the more legendary account of the life of the Buddha. And this Mukalinda seems to be a Naga of water. But when the Buddha is in Uruvela, he meets this Naga of fire in this fire chamber. And he spends the night there. But he is warned by Uruvela Kashyapa that the shrine is home to a dreadful, venomous Naga king who possesses great magical power. But the Buddha insists that he wants to be there that night. And what happens is that it's a very interesting encounter of the Buddha meeting this Naga of fire with fire. But in a way, it's a fire of compassion. He's not trying to destroy the Naga. And over the night, all the Uruvela Kashyapa and his followers are looking in horror as flames spewed from the chamber, and all these fires and lights coming from the chamber. And then Gautama, Buddha, comes out of the chamber the following morning with this snake, a tame snake as it were, in his begging bowl, and with its fire, inner fire extinguished, and just shows that snake to them. And it's interesting that the Buddha is trying to communicate to them. I feel like this is still the Buddha trying to find a way of communicating his experience to others, so to them. And because they are fire worshippers, he's using that language, the language of fire. So in the same vein, the Buddha keeps performing miracles like that, for a few more nights. This is after the monsoon. So the period that he spent with the fire ascetics and the others that came and became arahants was during the monsoon. So this is after the monsoon, and apparently the Buddha spent a few months with these fire worshippers. But Uruvela Kashyapa was a very proud man. So Uruvela Kashyapa said to himself, "Powerful and majestic is this great ascetic, since he can overcome this fierce, venomous, poisonous dragon king's psychic power with his own power. But he is surely not as worthy as I am." So he regards, Uruvela Kashyapa still regards the Buddha as inferior to him. So the Buddha keeps performing these miracles, and Uruvela Kashyapa keeps thinking to himself, boy, it's very impressive what this guy can do, but he's still not as developed as I am. And they have a few encounters. There's one encounter where the Buddha is very considerate with Uruvela Kashyapa, in which all the householders that support Uruvela Kashyapa and his followers come for a celebration of a particular rite. But Uruvela Kashyapa is a bit nervous that the Buddha is going to show up and he's going to lose face, in front of his followers if the Buddha performs one of these miracles, fire miracles. But the Buddha is, very aware of this and very respectful of Uruvela Kashyapa and his followers. He doesn't show up. He just allows them to have their rite that night. But then they have a very interesting encounter, and Uruvela Kashyapa is still thinking, that he's above the Buddha. And the Buddha, out of compassion, decides to speak the truth to Uruvela Kashyapa. And I find that this is very interesting because it's, in a way, I think what the Buddha is doing is offering friendship to Uruvela Kashyapa. And he says to him, listen, Kashyapa, you are not an enlightened master. Nor are you on the way of becoming one. Furthermore, nothing you are doing will enable you to become one, or even to enter the path to enlightenment. Do you understand? And that seems to be a very important moment, for Kashyapa. It's a bit of a turning point for him. Yeah. Later on, Kashyapa recalls that moment and says, seeing the marvels of the famous Gautama, I did not at once fall down before him, being deceived by envy and pride. Knowing my intention, the charioteer of men urged me on. Then there arose in me hair-raising agitation, despising what little supernormal power I had had previously. When I was an ascetic with matted hair, I went forth in the conqueror's teaching. Yeah. So I find that very moving, actually, that moment, that acknowledgement of Uruvela Kashyapa of being deceived by envy and pride. Yeah. And that encounter with the Buddha, just cutting through that veil of envy and pride in him. So what happened next is that following Uruvela Kashyapa, all his disciples become disciples of the Buddha, and they cut their matted hair, their dreadlocks, and they throw them to the river. And then the other fire worshippers alongside the river, they see these dreadlocks floating on the water, and they want to come and see what has happened. Yeah. So eventually, all of them became followers of the Buddha. Yeah. And then the Buddha gathers them. It's a company of 1,000. It's fire worshippers, and then he teaches something that has been known as the fire sermon. Yeah, when the Buddha starts saying, "All is burning," and he goes, it's in a way it's a reflection of the five senses and how our experience all is burning. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I just want to say something about a couple of words that the Buddha uses. So the key bit here for me in this fire sermon is the Buddha says something like, experiencing revulsion, the person who practices, who understands in this way, becomes dispassionate. Through dispassion, his mind is liberated. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge, it's liberated. He understands, destroyed its birth. The holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is not more for this state of being. Yeah. So that word revulsion, it appears quite a bit in renditions of the Dharma, and the word is passionate as well. There are translations of two words. One is viraga, which is dispassionate, and nibida, which is revulsion or turning away. And that sometimes they don't quite work for me, those two words. I need to find other ways of relating to those. So I really like a translation from another member called Divan, who did his own translation. Actually, I wanted to say something as well about this, about the whole idea of translating the Dharma. Yeah, because for Bhante, that's very important. This archetype of the translator here. So he himself, Sangharachita, saw himself as a translator of the Dharma. But it's something also that I think as part of Triratna and part of this journey, we need to take on that role of translating the Dharma. Yeah. In my case, sometimes it's very literal, that my mother tongue is Spanish, so it's not English. So sometimes I need to do a literal translation into another language. But I think for all of us, we need to translate, especially for us, which we have the responsibility of being fathers, and different aspects of our lives might not seem very obviously, as a sort of a way of practicing the Dharma. We need to translate the Dharma in a way that is relevant, is effective in our lives. So another way of translating this passage that I just read is this from Divan, which says, disenchanted, one becomes self-possessed. And self-possessed here means recollected and present, all together there. Know who we are and what we think at a given moment. And being self-possessed, one becomes liberated. One directly knows birth is destroyed. What had to be done has been done. There is no more to do. And I like that, evoking that experience of, that experience of having completed something, coming to the end of something. And this is having completed the journey altogether. There's nothing more to do. That's the experience that the Buddha is trying to communicate. I don't know how am I doing with time, but I'm not going to dwell too much on this. Just to say that, in that discourse, the Buddha is talking about greed, hatred, and delusion. So our experience is born with greed, hatred, and delusion. Also, I try to find equivalence to those. So greed can be better translated as compulsion, maybe. In our lives, that sense of something that keeps pushing us towards what is lacking in our experience. Hate might be more like hostility. We might not be very hateful, all the time, but maybe we are hostile, or we build these walls, of isolation with other people around us. And delusion, maybe we are very good at thinking clearly, but sometimes maybe it's not so much about thinking, but the confusion that comes from, that distance between our emotions and our ideas, in our experience. I just want to say something about fire itself, because the Buddha uses this metaphor of fire quite a bit. So he talks about fire being enlightened is extinguishing, or the quenching of the fire. So very early on, when he's trying to communicate who he is and what his experience is, he says, I am the accomplished one in the world. I am the teacher supreme. I alone am a fully enlightened one, whose fires are quenched and extinguished. And also his disciples, talk in those terms. There's a very beautiful passage from one of the disciples of the Buddha, a bhikkhuni, Patakara, and she talks or she describes her experience of enlightenment as in this way. I took a lamp and I inspected myself. I inspected the bed and sat on the couch. Then I took a needle and drew out the wick. The complete release of my mind was like the quenching of the lamp. So that nirvana or nibbana sometimes is translated as that, is an extinguishing of the fire, of the quenching of the fire. But fire in a way is an element, so it's neutral. It depends how we use it. It can be positive or negative. We use that as well in our rituals. So sometimes we say, for example, from his greater lamp, talking about the lamp of compassion in the Buddha, a lesser lamp we light within us. Or when we dedicate the mandala, we talk about the fires that transmute samsara into nirvana. So fire can have that quality as well. And well, in the kesas that we are wearing, the Aryavacin, Dharmajit and me, are wearing tonight, we have the fire of transformation, of purification behind the three U's. So fire is a very interesting element. Yeah, I would like to explore that a bit more. So the other word that I was referring to was this passion. Yeah, that in the translation that I choose from Divan, he uses the word disenchanted rather than dispassion. Yeah? And I like that a bit more because I think of myself as a passionate man. I like that. You know, I like to think of the passions that I follow in my life. The passions that they can take the shape of inspiration, for example. But being disenchanted is a bit more subtle. Yeah, so you are not under the spell any longer of those three poisons. Yeah, greed, hatred, and delusion. So you don't believe, even when they emerge in you, you don't fall fully into their spell, as it were. So you are not enchanted by them any longer. As I said before, I just recently went to a William Blake retreat, and I really like William Blake reading of William Blake. And Bante talks a bit about William Blake as well. So William Blake says, to be in a passion, you good may do, but no good if a passion is in you. Yeah. So I'm reading that again. To be in a passion, you good may do, but no good if a passion is in you. So this thing about to be in a passion, or the passion being in you, the passion is in you. Yeah. And Bante says something about that. He says, every time that I say Bante, by the way, I'm referring to Sankarachita. I think that's probably clear for everybody, but just in case. To be in a passion, Bante says, is to be completely into something as an individual. Yeah. So in a way, we are partaking of something that is taking us to another level of consciousness, but we don't lose our individuality. Yeah. And I think that's very important. That's a very important experience, very creative space. Whereas when the passion is in you, you are sinking to the sub-individual level. You are just taking over. You cease to exist. The individual is in abeyance. Yeah. So I don't know if the expression in English is passion or crime, you know, but in Spanish we have that experience, that expression, sorry, of you know, somebody, for example, completely overcome by jealousy and killing, you know, their lover or their partner and their lovers. You know, that kind of madness that comes from an emotion that really overtakes, and you lose your sense of individuality. You lose your sense of who you are. You are not self-possessed any longer. Yeah, what is possessing you is this passion, this madness, as it were. And I like Blake as well, because he sort of turns around the whole imagery of Christianity. Yeah. So for Blake, for example, hell is a good place. You know, it's a very rich and creative place. It's a place of flame, and along with it becomes the exuberance, the delight of the flames of transformation. Yeah. So Bante says about this, you got to descend into the flames, as Blake would have said, and transform them, to walk in the light, enjoy and use the flames, not run away from them. So there's something a bit, you know, sort of an invitation, yeah, advocating this contact with the flames, and the fire chamber. You know, these flames are a very beautiful allegory to our emotions. Yeah? How in contact we are with our emotions, with the energy that comes from our emotions. I realized something. I want to read something that Bante says about fire just before talking a bit more about the emotions. When the fire is blazing, when energy is soaring upwards, the mental conflicts are resolved, problems are transcended. They become like wisps of smoke flowing in all directions, or little sparks. This is also a state of continuous creativity, something higher and even higher is being produced all the time. The state of fire is a state of higher and even ever higher spiritual experience. It is a state of the true artist and the mystic, not in their ordinary everyday lives, but at their peak, when they are creating, when they are reaching out to that which is beyond, when the flame is soaring right up into the sky. So this is Bante talking a bit more about fire. Just to finish, to run my talk, so I'm going to say something about a bit more about what the Buddha refers to in terms of fire. He talks about, for example, he talks about the fire that can have a pure radiance or a defiled radiance. And I'm just going to borrow now from Rumi. It's a little quote from Rumi. They say, you've gotten drunk on so many kinds of wine. Taste this. It won't make you wild. It's fire. Give up if you don't understand by this time that your living is firewood. So I really like that image of our lives are already firewood. We are already burning. Yeah, we are already being consumed to some extent with some fires. Yeah. And the Buddha, just coming back to this, the Buddha makes this distinction between the fire that has pure radiance and the fire that has a defiled radiance. And he uses this simile again of the oil lamp that is burning with impure oil and an impure wick. Yeah. So similarly, he talks about sloth and torpor, or restlessness and remorse being an impure oil or an impure wick, or being like an impure oil and an impure wick in our lives. So I was thinking of that because obviously we are in our emotions sort of are a very important part of our experience. So it would be interesting to reflect a bit about what kind of emotions we experience more frequently. Yeah. I think it's Subhuti who talks about the quantum of negativity. Yeah. So even if we are not very aware of our tendencies, they have a momentum. Our emotions have a momentum, and we, willingly or not, we share that with others. I had a friend in Cambridge. We just used to talk of smelly emotions. Yeah. So it's this kind of emotions that we share with others are. They are a bit obsessive, but they are maybe like a dimly radiance that we are, sharing with others. Those little obsessions, maybe we tend to complain a lot about work. We tend to complain a lot about somebody, our tendencies, of talking repeatedly about a topic, maybe politics, maybe sex, maybe something, that we are constantly going into, but it's not very creative, it's that dimly light of our experience. And just to finish, I want to read this little passage from George Bernard Shaw that was, I think probably you have read or heard this before in Triratna. It's somewhere there in vintage Triratna. And he uses this, when he's talking about the real joy in life, he uses this image of fire that I like to finish with. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a sort of a splendid torch, which I have got hold of for the moment. And I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. So that's what I have to say about fire.